Welcome to day 2 of Step Up AZ 2018. We're glad you're all back today. I just wanted to reiterate about our speaker tables that we'll have this afternoon. They will be out in the foyer out there, and there'll be signs on each one of the tables so you'll know what the topic of the speaker that you're going to be talking to is. And also remember that Corey Runge is going to be doing crisis, and he wasn't listed in the program. I want everyone, after all the talks this morning and the expert tables this afternoon, if you can be thinking about how you can help your county or area to be thinking how you can forward stepping up in your area, I want you to be thinking about that, because this afternoon, after the expert tables, we'll have a wrap-up. And we're going to be compiling those thoughts, and we'll get those out to you so that everybody can see that. So think about that, and we'll be passing a mic around for people to speak, and we'll be doing that after the expert tables. If everybody didn't remember about taking their luggage to the front desk, please feel free to do so. They'll keep your luggage for you. And also, I have the attorney continuing ed certificates. So at the end of the day, I'll be sitting over at that table over there. You can just stop by and I'll give you one. I want to introduce Audrey. She'll be introducing Sheila Polk.
Morning, everyone. I'm Audrey Dorfman. I serve on the board of David's Hope, as well as being a member of the Yavapai Justice and Mental Health Coalition. For those of you who were fortunate enough to be at last night's awards dinner, you heard about the incredible work that has been going on in Yavapai County and why County Attorney Sheila Polk was honored for her dedication to enhancing the public safety of our community. A good community is a cohesive, safe, confident, prosperous, and happy place. It strives to be free of poverty and crime, providing a high quality of life for everyone that lives there. It values and promotes respect for the rights, differences, and dignity of others. Positive experience with communities allows individuals to feel more connected to their environment and the people in it. The strong feeling of connection to the group also works to combat any mental illness that can arise from alienation in the form of anxiety and depression. Positive communities work to ensure that those who fall in minority populations are not treated differently. Individuals elected to leadership positions within positive communities should be fair and just in their focus. Sheila Polk is one such leader whose values assist in the decisions made to make Yavapai County a good community. It is my pleasure to introduce County Attorney Sheila Polk.
Well, good morning, everyone, and thank you, Audrey, for those wonderful comments, especially about the comments about community. I'm sure everyone in this room shares that sentiment that life is about quality, and quality is about family and the community that surrounds all of us. It's really my privilege to take a few moments this morning to talk about the wonderful things that are going on in Yavapai County around decriminalizing mental illness. And I want to start with a quick story about a young man named Travis, 29 years old, who had moved to Prescott a few years ago. Travis suffers from mental illness. He's bipolar. And he was doing fine in Prescott until one day when he went to the pharmacy to fill his prescription and was told it was going to cost him $400. Now, obviously something was wrong, had been messed up with his insurance, and the pharmacist tried to work with Travis to get it figured out. But within a couple of days, Travis, without his medication, started to decompensate. He started having fits of rage. He got into a fight, a squabble with his roommate, broke the coffee table, and his roommate called 911. The police responded, and what the police saw at the scene was a scene of domestic violence. And so they arrested Travis and took him to the Yavapai County Jail. Now, fortunately for Travis, by 2015, under the leadership of our Yavapai County Sheriff, Scott Masher, our county jail had already started a mental health pod. And so Travis was identified. His mother had called in to give the jail staff some background. Travis was put in the mental health pod. His medications were provided to him. He quickly stabilized, a complete turnaround. The jail worked with my office to get the charges dismissed. And then Travis was released from jail and really with the help of Audrey Dorfman, put back into the community. New housing found, transportation found, enrolled in Voc rehab, and Travis is doing great. Travis has not re-entered our criminal justice system. But I start with that story because it illustrates, on the one hand, how far Yavapai County had come a couple of years ago. It's an opportunity to me to fast forward to where we are today, to talk about the great things we've done in the last 2 years. And then it also highlights, I think, the work that we all have to continue to do. Yavapai County, by the way, covers 8,000 square miles. We are a rural county. We are divided by the Mingus Mountain Range. We always talk about the Verde Valley as one area, and then the Prescott side is the other area, the western side. 8,000 square miles, but our population is only 211,000. Under the leadership, as I said, of the Yavapai County Sheriff, this is a picture of our detention center, our main detention center that sits over in the Verde Valley. I love this detention center. It's very rural out there. The only thing out there, other than the jail and the court system, is the Out of Africa Wild Animal Park. So the last time I tried a case over in the Verde Valley, every afternoon you could hear the lions roaring as they were waiting to be fed. But a very, very, obviously very rural area where it is located. But let me fast forward to just a couple of years since Travis's encounter with the Yavapai County criminal justice system. Because where we are today is we have made just leaps and bounds, starting with the CIT training. You heard a little bit, a couple of our officers got an award last night for the wonderful job they're doing to get all of our officers trained in CIT, how to respond to that scene. And one might think that even Travis's situation, he might have not even have entered our jail system if the officers had been trained in CIT at the time that they had that first encounter with Travis. But the other thing we've done, and that CIT training continues, it's absolutely true what the major said yesterday, is that that's never a project that ends. But the other thing we've done in the last 2 years that I think has made a tremendous difference is the creation of these mobile crisis teams. So Yavapai County now has 2 mobile crisis teams, one in our Verde Valley area and then one on the Prescott side. Taros manages the mobile crisis team on the Prescott side, and then Spectrum is the provider of the mobile crisis team on our Verde side. But I want to just show you some of our statistics. These are Spectrum statistics, but they would hold true for Taros as well. But what this shows you, this is a period of time, and I'm going to give you these stats because I'm sure you can't read them from back there, but this is a period of time of 2.5 years from when Spectrum first started their mobile crisis team. And what you can see from this data is, and of course you all know that law enforcement is called to a scene, And in the old days, they really had no option. They had two options, actually. They had the option of taking them to the emergency room or the option of taking them to the jail. Now, as we train our officers that we have these mobile crisis teams available, that more and more they're starting to call the mobile crisis team, and more what we're seeing is that individuals are being either community stabilized or they're getting services through Spectrum or through one of our behavioral health organizations, and very few are actually ending up going to jail. So for example, in this is Spectrum's data for 2 years and 2 months of the total number of contacts. The total number of community contacts are 3,197. And of that number, routinely, 50% are being community stabilized. 10 to 14% are voluntarily admitted to psychiatric hospitalization, and 5% are involuntarily admitted to psychiatric hospitalization, 4 to 5% admitted to medical hospitals, and 4% going into detox. But of that number that I gave you for 2.5 years, 3,197 responses by Spectrum, over that 2.5 year period, only 15 individuals ended up being arrested and taken to the Yavapai County Jail, which is pretty incredible considering what happened when law enforcement didn't have this option. And let me break it down further for you, specifically for those individuals that were law enforcement involved. So this chart shows you just the 2-month period for Spectrum in 2018, so February and March of 2018, where law enforcement involved cases. We had 70 instances where law enforcement called Spectrum in 2 months. 53% of those individuals were community stabilized. 23% were voluntarily admitted to a psychiatric hospitalization. 3% court-ordered into psychiatric hospitalization. 1% to detox. 14% went to the emergency room after all. 1 person declined services. And out of the 70 contacts with law enforcement in a 2-month period in the Verde Valley, only 1 person was arrested. So think about that difference, because that would have been 70 people who either would have gone to the emergency room, and even then many of them end up being arrested, compared to where we are today with only 1 out of 70 ending up being arrested. I do have to think again about Travis's situation, and if we had had a mobile crisis team when Travis had his episode, again, I would think he probably never even would have ended up in our county jail. The other big change that Yavapai County has seen is the creation of our Crisis Stabilization Unit, and this is managed by West Yavapai Guidance Clinic. They opened the CSU, Crisis Stabilization Unit, they opened it on June 21st of 2017. And as we train more and more of our law enforcement officers that this is yet another option where if they can encourage a person that they have contact with to voluntarily go to CSU, then it might have a different outcome. And again, the statistics for CSU are pretty amazing. So in this period of 9 months, which is between June 21st of 2017 to March 31st of 2018, the CSU had 2,082 patient contacts. 15% had been previous admissions. Their average length of stay there is 3 days. And for law enforcement drop-offs, during that 9-month period, we saw 280 individuals taken by law enforcement to the CSU instead of to the jail or perhaps to the emergency room. We have our biggest user is the Prescott Valley Police Department. The CSU is actually located in Prescott Valley. So in that 9-month period, Prescott Valley police officers took 150 individuals to the CSU. Prescott is our second biggest user with 65 individuals. The Sheriff's Office transported 52 individuals and then 13 other individuals from other agencies. But again, as we train more and more of our police officers, as more and more understand the option, then this is going to become, I think, a preferred method of contact for law enforcement. What's wonderful about both of our mobile crisis teams as well as our CSU is the amount of time that the officer involved with the situation is really very limited. It's about a 5-minute interaction at the CSU for law enforcement. There's a backdoor entrance, and once the patient has entered the door, the law enforcement officer does some minimal paperwork and then can get back out on the street and back out on patrol. So it's a pretty amazing option. And then the program that I really am most excited about is the program that just was recently launched by the Yavapai County Sheriff's Office called Reach Out. And this program is under the leadership of Sheriff Scott Masher and his Chief Deputy, Dave Rhodes, and then some incredible people who are in the room this morning. But Reach Out, I describe Reach Out as the most groundbreaking, visionary program that I have seen in my 36 years being involved in the criminal justice system in Arizona. Because so much of what we have tried to do up until now comes from the court system. But as you all know, once a person is in the jail, once charges are brought, once the attorneys are involved, the judges are involved, it's a lengthy process, oftentimes with individuals sitting in jail and not getting services. And at the back end, we try to get them services through probation, but meanwhile, what has happened to that individual while they're sitting in our jails? Reach Out is based on the premise that they are going to try to identify mental health and substance abuse issues at the earliest possible moment. So the team at the Yavapai County Jail is now screening every individual who comes into their doors within 24 to 48 hours. This is made possible with some funding from the Arizona State Legislature. And with that funding, the jail has hired, or is in the process of hiring, 9 full-time release coordinators who are essentially social workers, but their job is to screen, identify the need, and then make those connections at the earliest possible moment to treatment and to other services to make sure connect people to funding, whether it's access or other funding sources. But it's really based on 4 components. First is the identification at the earliest possible moment of mental health and substance abuse disorders. Partner with the community to assess available resources, identify our gaps, and then plan for community change. Provide services consistent with community and public health standards, and then link individuals to care in order to prevent and reduce reoffending. The focus is on the whole person, and the Reach Out staff really works with all of our community partners from the CSU, our medical hospitals, our mobile crisis teams, our behavioral health folks, and of course our law enforcement. Just a few slides about the results we're seeing for Reach Out so far. This is just a snapshot. Now, Reach Out launched on March 19th of this year. One of the things I love everything about Reach Out, but one of the things I really love is the planning that went into it and the collection of data. We all get excited about a new program, and people jump on board because we're so eager to see change for the better, but oftentimes we don't collect the data to be able to assess whether or not this program is really making a difference. What the Sheriff's Office has done is they obtained a grant, they obtained baseline data, and all along the way they are collecting data so that they can really objectively assess at the end of their pilot, is Reach Out effective and what kind of difference is it making? So they have funding for a 3-year pilot, thanks to Senator Sylvia Allen. I don't know if she's in the room here this morning, but thanks to Senator Allen and then the state legislature and our governor. So since March of 19th of this year, Reach Out has done 256 screenings. What they have identified in those screenings is that 70% of those individuals screened need some sort of services. A need was identified, and only 30% were identified as not needing services. They identified 24% of those screened as having mental health needs. And what's interesting to me about that statistic is that's very consistent with what the Arizona Department of Corrections finds as well. Their statistics on their website show that 25% of prisoners in Arizona state prisons have mental health needs. But our reach out staff has identified 24% of those screened as having mental health needs, 22% having substance abuse needs, and then the others on this pie chart include employment, veterans, transportation needs, housing needs, individuals identified with ACE needs. They're matching people with children with big brother, big sisters, which is a really cool component, and then also with community coaching. This chart shows the great work that the staff at the jail is doing to match the needs with the services we have available. Now, there's a gap here between needs identified and the ability to link them with services. Partly that's because the program has just launched, and so the staff is continuing to make those connections out in the community. And then also, I think the good thing about the data that we're collecting is that it will ultimately show us where are the gaps in Yavapai County, and then give us some strategies to try to fill those gaps and fill those needs. So what this chart shows you, that column to the left, the orange is the need identified. And so of the screenings, 119 individuals were identified as needing mental health and substance abuse treatment. And of 119, the staff was able to connect 46 of those individuals to services so that upon release, these individuals could go right into services. So that's the good news. And then it also shows us the work that needs to be done and making sure that we can meet those needs out in the community. The second column is the need for housing. 32 individuals identified as needing housing, and then the jail staff was able to make 18 connections, which I think is awesome. You know, in the old days, we released individuals from the jail just right back out on the street. And as we all know, so many of those individuals ending up homeless or just cycling right back into our jail. So how cool is it that staff at the Yavapai County Jail is releasing individuals who need housing and connecting them to housing services in our community? The third column, 49 individuals identified as needing transportation, and 17 connections made. 14 individuals identified as veterans, and 13 of those 14 connected to veteran services in our communities. 39 identified with employment needs, with 27 connections made, another awesome statistic. 38 identified with needing community coaching, and 12 connections made. And then that last column, which is really cool, is we all know that when individuals end up in our jails, oftentimes there are children back in the homes who now have lost the mother or the father figure. And so our staff identified that they could work with big brothers, big sisters in Yavapai County to try to get services, a big sister or a big brother, for those kids that are back in those homes. And even when mother or father is released from the jail, that clearly is a home situation where that child is going to benefit long-term from that match having been made with a big. So that's a really cool statistic as well. The jail is collecting data, as I said. It's a 3-year pilot, and our hope is that with the data we collect and with the model that the staff is developing, that we have something that other counties, and in particular rural counties, can look at as a way to address the needs of our inmates, the needs of the folks coming through our doors, particularly mental health and substance abuse needs. And then our hope is that we can reduce the reoffenders, reduce recidivism by stabilizing these individuals in the community and then not seeing them again. I am up here as a cheerleader for this program. This is not my program. I am not the one who deserves to get credit. It truly is the leadership of the Yavapai County Sheriff and his Chief Deputy. So I'm going to give you a few names, and I want these folks from Yavapai County to stand up, and you can see who they are. Plus, if you have questions, want to make connections with them, then you can do that. But, first of all, I have to recognize Audrey Dorfman, who is our incredible community volunteer, who is that person who's right here saying, you can do better, and really pushing us to do better, to be visionary, and to think outside of the box. So we have Audrey, we have, the funding with the leadership of Senator Sylvia Allen was amazing. We have the support, we've got from our Board of Supervisors, Jack Smith, who's been very supportive of the work that we're doing. Captain Jeff Newnham, who's sitting at the table, he's the captain of our jail, and so all of this is happening under his leadership. Dave Rhodes isn't here this morning. We, as you've heard, Yavapai County was lucky enough to net Bea Thayer, so she's heading up our mental health coalition and very much a part of this project. And then the folks who are day in and day out doing this work, and that's Lieutenant Silvernell, Christy Hambrick, Stephanie Mary, I'm not sure who all else is at our table, but these are the folks who, they are in the jail and they are reaching out into our communities to find these services, make these connections, provide transportation from our jail for these individuals directly to treatment or services or whatever the need is, which is really incredible because, as you saw from the picture of our jail, it's out on Highway 260. There is nothing out there. And this incredible team is making Reach Out happen. So all of you awesome folks from Yavapai County, and Ben and Ethan, all of you stand up so everyone can give you a well-deserved round of applause. So I want to touch on a couple of other things we're doing in Yavapai County as well that are helping to make a difference. MatForce is our Yavapai County Substance Abuse Coalition that we formed back in 2006. In 2011, MatForce launched our Yavapai Reentry Program. And the goal is to reach out to individuals who are leaving prison who have identified Yavapai County as their place of residence. And so we reach out to the individuals while they're still in prison. We offer them services of our reentry program. And for those who want it, when they come back into one of our communities, they are partnered with a community coach. And then the community coach serves everything from being their champion, being their advisor, helping them with employment, with writing that resume, help find them housing, transportation, services in the community. The Reentry Project has some amazing statistics so far. The recidivism rate in Arizona for folks leaving prison, the chances of them reoffending and ending back in one of our state prisons is about 34% within 6 years. That's a very dismal, disappointing recidivism rate for Arizona. For folks that enter Yavapai Reentry Project, since 2011, we've had 189 individuals leave state prison, come back to one of our communities, get a community coach, and since we started the program, of those 189 individuals, only 15 have reoffended. So that's a success rate of 92%, which is really pretty amazing. The Reach Out folks reached out to Yavapai Reentry. And so our latest effort is to see if we can extend our community coaches and the work we do through Yavapai Reentry and match individuals who are leaving jail to community coaches to help them again get through that challenging period of time and not reoffend. Another project of MATForce is our Overdose Fatality Review Board. We launched this project in 2016, really in response to the opioid crisis. And what we wanted to look at was, what are those underlying factors that result in individuals in Yavapai County overdosing and dying on substances? And our goal is to identify what are the commonalities, and then identify gaps in services in our community, and try to figure out, how could we have prevented that death? Is there something that we could have done differently? And if yes, can we change it and make it better to reduce the number of drug overdoses in our county? We've done 2 reports now, and the way the Fatality Review Board works is we identify cases that we want to study in depth. We obtain the police reports, we get releases from family members to look at the medical records, we interview family members, we interview folks in the community who had contact with this individual, and then we release a report. So the second report that we just released last week covers cases that we reviewed in 2017. So in 2017, we reviewed 11 cases. 5 of the and it's interesting because when you hear about the opioid crisis, everyone thinks prescription drugs or heroin. Our research tells us that most folks who overdose have multiple drugs in their system. So the 11 cases that we looked at in 2017, 5 individuals died from what the medical examiner called mixed drug intoxication, 2 individuals from mixed heroin and meth intoxication, 1 case of meth and ethanol intoxication, 1 case of mixed drugs, fentanyl intoxication. We had 1 individual who died of acute methamphetamine intoxication, 1 case involving acute heroin intoxication, and then the final case involved mixed drug and ethanol intoxication. What's interesting about the data that we're identifying, though, are when we look at the commonalities, what we found in 2016 and again in 2017 is the prevalence of mental illness in these overdoses. So of our 11 cases, 11 of the 12 individuals had reported mental illness. And I think about that because when you hear about the opioid crisis, you don't really hear much talk about the effect on individuals with mental illness. But what our research is telling us is that individuals with mental illness really are the most vulnerable population that will fall victim to the prevalence of illegal substances out in our communities. We also found that 8 of the, or I guess we reviewed 12 cases, but 8 of the 12 had significant medical issues. 2 had a history of suicide attempts. 3 of the 12 were homeless at the time of their deaths. 6 of the 12 were unemployed at the time of death. And then 5 of these individuals, 5 of the 12, were on probation or parole at the time of their death, which is really, to me, something that says we need to open up our eyes, because these are individuals already getting services either through parole or probation, and yet 5 lives were lost for individuals who are already getting, services to the best of our ability. 6 of the 12 had spent time in jail. 10 of the 12 had received outpatient treatment. 10 of the 12 had received inpatient treatment. 3 of the 12 had family members with a history of drug and alcohol addiction. 3 of the 12 had a significant other who had died from a drug overdose. And then 9 of the 12 had used alcohol and marijuana at an early age. So the work of this board continues. And our goal is to learn from these deaths and see if we can take steps in our community to address and fill the gaps that this review board is identifying. I just want to end with a couple of comments for everybody in the room and for our law enforcement folks in the room. Because we know that with any problem that we face, although the emphasis and the attention falls on law enforcement, what we know is all of these are community problems that law enforcement alone cannot cannot address, cannot save. And that's why these partnerships between all of you in the room and with our law enforcement folks and with our prosecutors and with our courts is so important. But I think about our law enforcement officers, and I just want to invite you for a moment to think about what we ask of them. Because every single day, our police officers must be prepared to act as a first responder, to make split-second analyses of complex, irrational situations, to rapidly sort out who needs help and who poses a danger, to witness gruesome accident and crime scenes, to administer life-saving first aid, to detect drug and alcohol impairment, to reverse a heroin overdose with Narcan. And we ask our law enforcement officers to become experts on a wide variety of topics, including mental health and substance abuse and domestic violence and terrorism and geography and animal control, to identify drugs, to learn and be familiar with a myriad of laws from federal to state to county and local laws. They must know weapons, they must know self-defense, and they have to have, and we ask them to have, an intimate knowledge of the people, places, and things in their communities. We ask them to memorize stacks of legal standards. We ask them to compose mountains of reports recalling every detail of their work, and to become masters of the legal system, where we call upon them to take the stand and tell their stories, recalling every detail and always testifying with the utmost of veracity. We ask our law enforcement officers to run toward danger when the rest of us retreat. And yet we tend to only hear about the work of our law enforcement officers when they do something exceptionally well or when something goes terribly wrong. And in today's climate, it feels like we hear a lot about the few individuals who do something wrong. And yet the day-to-day work of our law enforcement officers, the stories you heard last night in our award ceremony of those incredible things that they do, those are really the reality of what they do every day, and so much of it goes unnoticed. And so I loved last night's ceremony because what I love is this partnership between everyone in the room, and the way everyone in the room and David's Hope recognizes that law enforcement, that they're not the enemy, but they are our partners, they are our collaborators, and that they are our protectors. I especially applaud David's Hope for being a leader and recognizing that partnership and that collaboration, and being there with us by our side, pushing us always to be better. And so I just want to end my comment first with saying thank you to all the law enforcement officers here in this room. We all recognize the incredible work that you do every single day, day in and day out, when no one else is watching. And then I want to say a special word of thanks to David's Hope for recognizing the incredible work that law enforcement does and recognizing the importance of collaboration and a partnership with law enforcement so that together we can make our communities a better place for everyone. So thank you to all of you, the incredible work you all do, and thank you to David's Hope in particular.
Thank you, Sheila, Polk, and what an honor it is and how exciting it is to see one of our county attorneys. And truthfully, Sheila, I mean, you're not a county attorney that's thought of as a softie. So to have you here in the leadership, it's just so, I guess it's probably typical of you and the way you've always done things. You've always done things methodically and working for the cause of justice. So to see you here as a leader here in this stepping up a movement across Arizona, I just can't thank you enough. And I also want to talk about how much we do appreciate law enforcement. And one of the reasons we're doing this is because it was really easy to do. I mean, it's just natural to want to thank law enforcement. Many of us as family members who have loved ones involved in the justice system, in Maricopa County, we'd be lucky enough to find perhaps our loved one on probation with the probation department that specializes to help people with mental illness. So Maricopa County is, they're all just a bunch of heroes to me, the probation department that they have that follows those folks. And I had interacted with those personally, as my son David had been in the system there. And unfortunately, there were many times that the help we needed came because of the work of the adult probation department, not through our mental health system. And I think that's what impacted me so much, to realize that necessarily your title is means as much as your mission. So, and sometimes titles can be deceiving. So I just want to emphasize the importance, as you said, of this continued working together for the common cause of justice. Justice and mercy and public safety, so that people don't continue to cycle through the justice system, coming back to us sicker than when they first went in. And I apologize again, I didn't introduce myself. There's a few people that weren't here yesterday. I'm Mary Lou Burnsig, Director of David's Hope. And I just want to welcome you all for being here for the second day. We're going to have a great time today. And I want to mention Captain Noonan that Sheila had mentioned is also going to be operating one of our expert tables this afternoon. So take advantage of that opportunity to meet at his table and spend some time getting to understand what their work's entailing and connect for future opportunities to learn from each other. I am going to, let's see, we're right on schedule here. I'm going to introduce our panel moderator, Ed Gilligan, who is the county administrator of Cochise County. And there he's coming. Ed is a magnificent leader in Cochise County. He was formerly the chief of adult probation in Cochise, and now started out as deputy county administrator, now is county administrator there. So he's a tremendous leader in many ways. He has been able to get himself just in the middle of all kinds of sorts of things where he's been able to use his experience that he's had through adult probation. He's been active with the Supreme Court Committee on Mental Health and Criminal Justice, and just has a tremendous track record. If you don't know Ed and you need help, Ed, you're willing to take some calls?
Absolutely.
So this man, he kind of keeps himself tucked away down there in Bisbee, but he's got a telephone, so I would encourage you to connect with him for just about anything. If you want to brainstorm. And one of the things about Ed is he's not afraid about thinking outside of the box and about telling things the way it is. So, and also could our panelists go ahead and come up? We're going to be doing our Sequential Intercept panel, so if you could all come up, you're welcome to sit wherever you'd like, and I will turn things over to Ed. Thank you all for being here today.
So, and I appreciate the introduction, Mary Lou, but today I am simply the conductor of an orchestra. The folks here to my right are the real experts today. Actually, to my left, it's my other right. They're the real experts today, and we've got 5 panelists. Mick, and we're on a first name basis now, and you can certainly search through your books for all sorts of detailed information. Mick, Paul, Mike, Kate, and a surprise at the end of the table. You are? Corey, it's nice to meet you. On our panel today, a couple of these folks are attorneys, Mick and Mike, the M's. And to start out today, I thought it'd be extremely appropriate, since we have a number of attorneys on our panel and in the audience, to start out with a lawyer joke. In Cochise County, that's how we break up our time in advance of board meetings and work sessions while we're waiting for folks to gather, is to tell lawyer jokes, and I especially appreciate them after working in the court system a number of years. But at a conference, much like this one, only a conference for research scientists, 2 of the researchers were having a social discussion in the lobby, and one of them shared the observation that in his laboratory they had discontinued using mice and started using attorneys for their experiments. And quizzitively, the other researcher asked why they had come to that rather revolutionary change in the business model. And researchers said, well, there were really 3 primary reasons. 1, we found that lawyers were far more available than mice. 2nd, we discovered that the lab assistants didn't get nearly as attached to the lawyers as the mice. And finally, we discovered that there are just some things you can't get a rat to do. Yeah. So, our challenge here today is to really share some local experiences and insight into the sequential intercept model. And that's a model that is focused on the intersections between criminal justice and mental health, and the various points in what can be a very long system. The various points at which, if we focus on intervention strategies, that we can divert people with mental health disorders from our criminal justice system. One of our panelists today, Paul O'Connell from the Arizona Department of Corrections, has spent a good part of his career focused on community reentry and parole services in our state. About a year ago, he was one of the signers on a statement of the future of corrections in our country. And it was a document that really talked about evidence-based practice and reducing the caseload sizes in community supervision. And when we look at the sequential intercept model, our prison system is the last stop. And it's also a first stop in reentry for people who have spent several years in custody. We've seen a number of changes in our state's parole system, some very interesting things in recent years. I'm just hoping that right off the bat, Paul may share some of his experiences and talk about the evolution in our prison system with, in particular, community reentry and mental health services.
Alrighty then. Good morning, everyone. Thanks for putting me up first. I appreciate it. Yes, my name's Paul O'Connell. I'm the Operations Director for Community Corrections for the Department of Corrections, and I've been with the department for about 10 years. But I've been in the criminal justice business for, oh gosh, about 38 years. starting off as a probation officer, supervising a specialized caseload for seriously mentally ill offenders, and doing just about everything else the department had to offer in Maricopa County. The system has changed quite a bit within those 38 years, but yet it still remains the same in a lot of areas. I can tell you that within the last 10 years since I've been with the department, there has been a monumental shift in how we approach offenders and inmates. The department has instituted a number of different programs within the walls, primarily because of the governor's leadership in this, Governor Ducey, in one of his statements of wanting to reduce recidivism. Under Governor Ducey, he has broken down the State Department's silos. So we are working with various state agencies within the systems, within the walls. And let me give you an example of that. Probably within the last few years, we've opened up what we call employment centers within the department. These employment centers take individuals within their last 6 months of release and put them into a very intensive program. And we bring in community partners to help work with these inmates. We put them through extensive job employment services through the Department of Economic Security. We set them up with jobs upon release, which is unbelievable. There are job fairs within the walls that DES brings in what we call felon-friendly employers, and they have jobs waiting for them upon their release. There are skilled programs that the Home Builders Association from the department brings in. They are building structures on the grounds of the prison for practice. Once it's built, they dismantle it, and the next group that comes in rebuilds it. So there's a lot going on within the institutions. On the community side, and let me tell you, the prisons, we have 47,000 people incarcerated right now. That's a lot of people. There are about 18,000 who are released in any given year. So that's a little over 1,000 per month that come to my doors. Okay, so when they come to my doors within community corrections, basically we have a full gamut of people that we supervise. We don't choose who we supervise once they come out. But in community corrections, we have done a lot with community partners. We can't do our business without the community. It's that simple. We're good at managing people. We've gotten better in providing services over the years, but we've gotten better because of the work that we've done with you all. Ms. Polk mentioned the Yavapai reentry project. That to me, and we've been working with them for quite a while now, that to me is a state model. Having peer mentors for individuals coming back to the community and working with them, that would have never happened 10 years ago, 20 years ago. But the community has stepped up and recognized that people who go to prison come back. And they often come back to the communities where they came from. And hopefully we, as the Department of Corrections, sends them back in a better mindset, better position. So, but we can't do it alone. Okay, the recidivism rates that Ms. Polk has spoken about is phenomenal, and she's to be congratulated. Yavapai County should be congratulated. But we need more of them. And we, the community corrections, is working with local community coalitions through a grant that we received back in 2016. It's called the Second Chance Grant. And part of that grant is that we travel the state working with local coalitions by either assisting them or helping them, counties, to form coalitions to do exactly what they're doing in Yavapai County. So, we're out there, we're working. When it comes to the mental health areas, we have specialized caseloads, both in Maricopa County and Pima County, that deal specifically with high mental health needs offenders. We have reentry centers that we've incorporated back in, first one was in Pima County back in 2012, and then we just opened one here in Maricopa County in 2015. Those are the same things. We bring community members into those facilities to work with our offenders. So it's a shift. And I'll tell you one more thing, which is pretty phenomenal. I would have never seen this in my career. Motivational interviewing. We started motivational interviewing in community corrections about 8 years ago. We are now moving motivational interviewing into the prisons for correctional officers to use. Now think about that. Correctional officers using motivational interviewing in dealing with inmates. That would have never happened. Never happened. Think about that. But it's a different way of approaching individuals. Instead of, don't cross that line. You're going to get violated for this. You're going to get violated for that. It's more of an assistance and, what can you do to help yourself and how can we help you get to your goals? It's a different approach. And then community corrections is working, and we're really anxious to see how it's going to be working in institutions. But when we offer that training to those correctional officers, they love it. So it's just a different mindset, and we've come from so far over those 38 years.
Well, thank you, Paul. Paul brings up and touches on really a lot of the key concepts in every single part of the work that we all do in corrections and in treatment services. Partnerships are key. Collaborations, receptiveness to new ideas, promoting key concepts in a workforce that may be deeply entrenched in old ways of doing business. But it really, and drawing on that, the mention of partners are needed in every step to expand services. The work that Kate and Corey do is at the other end of the spectrum. In community services, Kate has spent much of her career working at times for the REBA, at times and currently for the prosecutor's office in Pima County, and in being involved in the development of new programs and enhancing some training services. With increased focus in recent years in building a model of intervention services and development and realization of a key intercept is the zero intercept, the one where prevention services in a community are strong and accessible. Kate, if you take some time to kind of talk about some of the new programs that are happening in the Tucson community, and then we'll tap Corey for some insight at that first level of intervention with police work.
Well, thanks, Ed. Good morning, everyone. I think some of you guys are still traumatized by my jokes last night. Somebody came up to me this morning and said, I just got the toast one. So, sorry about that. Thank you very much, Ed, for the question and for facilitating again. He's a wonderful moderator. In Tucson, we've really been very pleased to focus on Intercept Zero, which if you guys are familiar with the Sequential Intercept map, if you guys haven't seen it before, there's a copy of it in your green folders there. Pima County did a sequential intercept mapping exercise with the Gaines Center in 2016, or 15, if my memory is not mistaken. And one of the things that we realized is that while we had a lot of great things that were happening at Intercept 1, which is the law enforcement contact, that we could be doing things to push it even farther forward. And so we started thinking about some ways that we can entirely deflect the justice system altogether. And that's a little bit of a mixed bag. It comes not without complications. But one of the things that we looked at doing right away was, at that time, we already had a mental health support team with both our Tucson Police Department and our Pima County Sheriff's Department. And those MISS teams were making incredible gains in our community with how law enforcement was interacting with individuals who not only had mental health issues or crises, emergencies, but also just really complicated cases that otherwise would have kind of just gone in the wayside on the pile. And we would have really been waiting for something serious to happen with this person before law enforcement could get involved. But that's not enough, because it still requires some criminal history, or it has to have some sort of court or case interaction for that person to continue to be followed. And so one of the things that we looked at doing was implementing a co-responder. So what it is that the mental health support teams are paired up with somebody from our crisis mobile teams. And those, police officer or detective can respond to a scene concurrent with a crisis mobile team clinician. In the past, TPD or the sheriff's department might show up, and then they call the crisis mobile teams, and then you'd have to wait. And while Simpatico has done a great job of seeing that those CMTs are getting there really, really quickly, you still have that moment where that individual's in the community, they're already in crisis, they're already perhaps having difficulty de-escalating, because even though the MISS teams respond in plain clothes, they have unmarked vehicles, it's a very intentional approach to try and keep that person as calm as possible. It's still a police officer, and even with your best possible intentions, that might still escalate the situation. But when you have the clinician responding at the same time, you're not trying to keep that person there, and you already have somebody who is clinically appropriate to try and intervene from that first moment. It's a great solution for law enforcement in that it's much more time effective for them. They're not having to wait for somebody to show up. But it's also great for the clinicians as well, because they have a much better breadth of information seeing them from the first moment that they get there. And so it's only been in operation for a couple of months now, but so far the response has been really good. I think the feedback that we've gotten from Community Bridges, which is our partner in doing that, and with the MISS teams has been excellent. So we've been really pleased with that. TPD just a couple of months ago has started a new pilot program, which is a deflection. If you guys are familiar with the ANGEL programs or the LEAD program, there's lots of law enforcement models around the country right now where law enforcement is trying to experiment with ways that we can deflect entirely around criminal charges and directly to treatment. And this new deflection program is TPD's effort into treading into that foray. What they're doing is they find somebody who meets that appropriate criteria of they've got some sort of substance use or mental health history, and it's a charge that is not a mandatory citation in some form or fashion. Rather than cite that person or arrest them and take them to the jail, they're just dropping that person off directly in one of our detox centers. And so that's been great, because we've had a number of people who we've been studying on we've been calling a high utilizer list, where we've been trying to problem solve some of those folks who have been arrested the most number of times over the last 2 years. And one of the first things that TP did was take all of the names that were on our list of people who had been arrested more than 20 times in 2 years, and who had been arrested more than 10 times in 2 years, and plugged all those names into a database so that when TPD had interactions with them, if that person had a misdemeanor charge that was something that they did not have to cite for, they didn't have to intervene with immediately. Instead, they were taking those folks to one of our psychiatric urgent care centers in town. And it's saving, I would imagine, the city of Tucson a small fortune, but also it's completely circumventing the justice system and getting these folks right into treatment. One of the folks that we were working on who had been arrested 6 times, I think in the prior couple of months, this person is now being held in a brief intervention program, and he is going into residential treatment next week. And Community Bridges is already working on getting him housing, supportive housing, and some wraparound services for as soon as he gets done with residential treatment. So he's probably going to be in residential treatment for a couple months, and they're already thinking that far ahead. It's the best solution for that person, but it's also saving the community a lot of money, and it's improving public safety. And so those are the types of out-of-the-box things that we're trying to think about when it comes to that early deflection. How far forward in that interaction can we push this?
It's kind of an interesting takeaway from that in the evolution and reliance on expanding some database information and information sharing at that front end. We have technological resources now that Frankly, even as recently as a decade ago when the sequential intercept model was kind of being pushed out into application, technological resources that we didn't have then. And with officers all across the field with all sorts of data connectivity, that sharing of information to really give folks a background of who they're encountering and how many prior contacts and what sort of service history that folks have, and it just helps find that place to put them. Corey, in your career, you were, I guess, well positioned with having a background in psychology and social science in moving into a law enforcement world that kind of took off into crisis management and departed from what had been, I think, decades ago, traditional policing. But if you could just kind of share some insight into the evolution of the crisis response services in the Flagstaff area.
Sure, thank you. Well, my kind of lead-in is more experiential, and even my choice of how I became educated in it is because the problems I saw that was happening. I grew up in a house with mental illness, so I recognized it as a problem as police would respond to incidents I was near when I was growing up. And when I came into policing, yeah, I had a bachelor's degree in psychology because I was interested in it. I wanted to learn more about how individuals function. I actually thought it'd make me a better police officer. So I completed my psychology degree while I was a police officer at those beginning levels. And one thing I hope that everybody understands is generally when we hire police officers, they're 21 to 24 years old. And so you heard what County Attorney Polk was talking about, and all we're expecting them to do based on their experience in their young 21 to 24 year age. And those are the individuals who were responding to the crisis call. They have a limited amount of time to learn, and they are making the best decisions that they can make based on the experience and the education that they have at the moment. Even coming in and getting more experience in crisis intervention and the way police work runs, the Chief Treadway had come in, and they had sent some people to crisis intervention training down here in Phoenix, a 40-hour program. And they came back and said, yeah, it's great. And so Chief Treadway says, hey, we're looking for somebody to start a program here, and we want them to run it. And I don't know if any of you know Jolene Coulee, but Jolene Coulee was sitting there, and she pointed at me, and she goes, Runge has a psychology degree. So the chief goes, thank you, you're elected. And that's kind of how I've inherited it. And what they started doing was sending me all the police reports. And I kind of had to read every police report involving a person who experienced mental illness. And it was primarily suicidal ideation. That's the big thing. And a lot of times when we have federal programs running, we're talking about the opioid epidemic. And one of the things we're looking at right now is Coconino County really isn't experiencing the opioid issues that many other places in the nation are. On it, but we have 3 times the suicide rate of the national average. And so one thing I hope that all of you leaders remember as you bring this forward, it has to be community specific. Every program, we can talk about the Sequential Internet, the Stepping Up initiative, and they have to be broad enough to allow the local communities to look at what they have and use those same resources to different areas. It has to be variable so that the experts of that community can use these type of resources in the best way for that community. It has to be locally focused. And many of the things that we look at, we talk about, yesterday somebody mentioned Maricopa-centric. Maricopa-centric, it's because a lot of things are down there. There's more funds per capita of for mentally ill people in metropolitan areas than there is rural communities. But it's more expensive to provide those kind of services to rural communities because of the vast distances people have to travel. Therefore, response times vary. They're a lot longer in rural communities. And people have to drive maybe an hour, for some of the sheriff's deputies to get to their calls. I know Yavapai County experiences that from time to time. I used to be a deputy there, and it took me approximately 45 minutes to go from Black Canyon City up to Crown King on dirt roads. But the crisis doesn't change for the individual experiencing the crisis. And they had to experience it longer just to get the deputy to show up. But even when the deputy shows up, how do I get them to services now? How do I get a crisis team there? How do I do this? These crisis teams have to be available quickly. Therefore, it's almost pertinent that the rural communities have more resources. It's more expensive for them to be able to receive these crisis teams. And it's wonderful the things that Yavapai County is doing now and piloting this and setting the example in that way. And I'm hoping that this leads to some funding so that other areas like Navajo County and Apache County are able to do this. Because as people go in on the front end, we can talk about a couple components that law enforcement officers need. One, they need the education. And mental health first aid is one of those steps. But mental health first aid, when we talk about it, everybody's talking about training that law enforcement needs. Mental health first aid is intended for the community. It's law enforcement officers, we talk about how they're the first responders or firemen or paramedics. They're generally not the first responders. Generally, they're like the third responders. Generally, it's the individual experience in the crisis and the people standing around them, and they respond first. The second people to respond are our dispatchers, and the dispatchers have to be well trained to be able to triage and help the people who may not know about these issues on the spot prior to any first responder being able to get there. And then law enforcement, paramedics, or fire are really the third responders. And we're asking them to become mental health experts. At the same time, we're asking them to be criminal experts. We're asking them to represent the individual who may be creating the crisis and be involved in the crisis, and also represent the community who may be experiencing the consequences of that crisis. And then make the determination of, is this person committing a crime, right? And what do we do with them? Some things say we shall arrest. Well, are they just a mentally ill person who happens to be a criminal also? Or are they a mentally ill person who just happens to be experiencing a crisis in a medical episode? And so they have to make all these determinations very quickly and triage, and that's what the sequential intercepts model is about. It's a funnel. It's not intended to be perfect. It's intended to be kind of a screening process. And I do appreciate the points that are made. It is hard to pull back charges once they've been alleged. It does start this time comes in. I'm wondering if there's some ways we can streamline these processes as we educate people. The National Sheriff's Association and International Association of Chiefs of Police talk about the training that we're asking for of the police officers. The police officers generally are recommended that they all attend 8 hours of mental health first aid, and that 20% of staff go through crisis intervention training. And I think that's a very good step in the training process. But it does me zero good if I don't have the resources to take them to without taking them to jail. If the crisis response teams can't be there quickly or don't exist in my community, it does me zero good when I go to the doctor and the doctor says, well, that's the $1 million question, where do you take that individual? Although we are making some great strides. In the last 10, 15 years, I've seen huge improvements throughout all of the state of Arizona and the way we respond to crisis, the way we respond to mental health emergencies. And recently, Northern Arizona Regional Behavioral Health Authority, or the NARBA Institute, has been providing funding to develop instructors in mental health first aid, not just in Coconino County, but across all of Northern Arizona. And they're reaching out to areas like Navajo County and Apache County to start providing training, not just within law enforcement, but to the actual first responders, which are the community members themselves. So identifying mental illness is one piece of being able to link everybody into these other facilities that they need to go to. But the second component, and probably more importantly, is having a facility to take them to other than the jail, not at an 8 to 5 time frame, but at 2 a.m. involved in a domestic incident when, you know, our staffing is at its lowest, and so is everybody else's. And so that's what I'm hoping to reach out and challenge, is find ways to find the funding to support these other institutions so that there is another place to take an individual who's experiencing crisis, so that the officers have more time to make the correct assessment on, is this a crime or is this a health emergency?
Ed, can I ask a quick question? For those who are involved in their CIT, who's involved in their CIT programs in the communities? Raise your hand so I can see you guys. Okay, I'm curious, who among those, do you have dispatchers? Raise your hand if you have dispatchers. Oh, I only see, yeah. So if you guys are not involving dispatchers, may I encourage you very strongly. They are a critical component of our CIT program in Southern Arizona, and for all the reasons that Corey just said. It is so critical that dispatch is asking those right questions to correctly identify how they're responding to that situation, because how a police officer responds to a domestic violence call is going to be very different from how they respond to a mental health crisis. And so if you guys want to talk with us about how we involve dispatch, I'm available to anyone at any time. Sorry, thanks, Ed. My soapbox.
It's, and from Cochise County, and several of the things, Corey, that you mentioned really resonated. Some of the challenges throughout Arizona in, quite frankly, distance, the time it takes to get to places, respond, the lack of facilities when we think of placements, where do we take people? And sometimes the answer to that is there is nowhere to take them. And that's where the cycle of, well, it's the jail begins. And so, Kate, to the question about dispatch, when you asked that, and I thought of dispatching, the emphasis in rural areas is almost greater than in metro areas, because when time is a major hurdle and it's going to take that a while for an officer or a crisis responder to actually get to the individual who's in crisis, having a dispatcher at the front end of that who is trained and knowledgeable and can start using some of the skills that we're teaching our field officers and other professionals is really, really important. And that's one of the lessons I'm going to take home to Cochise County. So I really appreciate that. Mick, also a professional here today with us who has experienced in his career some of the challenges of small communities, being a available and resourceful attorney willing to do anything. He's also an individual who straddles two sides in a justice system, from prosecutor and defense. And I'm hoping that today he can share some insights about the challenges and observations from that unique position that he's made of the system.
Hey, good morning, everybody. Hope everyone's well. Yes, it's true. I mean, I am the contract prosecutor in the city courts in Cottonwood and in Clarkdale. That's in the Verde Valley. I spend probably 70% of my time doing that. And I also take occasional public defender appointments in a nearby city and also in the federal court in Flagstaff. So I don't know if that makes me bipolar or not, but frankly, I think it makes me a better attorney, and I'm better able to assess, in particular, the differences in the mental health delivery system in the criminal justice system. And there's certainly people here in this room who are much more experienced in this. I'm looking at Judge Finn is out there. I want to say hello to her. I mean, she's an expert in this area, really developed it, and I've learned a lot, I think, at this conference twice before. What I want to say is what we did in Cottonwood is I was a new prosecutor there. It was probably about 3 years ago. And frankly, I didn't know what tools I had there to address the mental health issues. We would see a lot of people where they're mentally ill, homeless. And what really helped me, and I would urge all of you, is to find a champion in your community that can back you up. And I had several champions and I didn't know I had that until there was a meeting of stakeholders that was put together, and a lot of the folks from Yavapai County that you're hearing about were those, and in particular new Chief of Police Steve Gazelle, who kind of hosted this stakeholders meeting. And that's when I realized I had what I call the political space to just run with the program and just do it. And I adopt the Nike approach, which is, just do it. And I knew it was right, and so we put together a whole program, and it's called the Alternative Sentencing Program in the Cottonwood Court. And basically it's to match up all these services together, the jail services, social services through Spectrum, all kinds of services, and then with the defendants in court hold, say, monthly review hearings. Are you working your program? How are you doing? And sometimes we give diplomas out too, and it's just been a fabulous thing, and it's really worked. And I want to tell you about one person. This man was named Parkaman, And he would walk through Cottonwood almost every day in a really heavy coat. And this is sometimes in the summer. It was 105 degrees there. And his name is Parkaman. No one really knew him well. He was kind of a loner. He would camp out in the woods. He got involved in low-level criminal activity, mostly trespass, littering, homeless crimes of that sort. Finally, we were able to, within the court system, get his attention. We found his family. His mother was in Iowa, didn't know he was alive, hadn't seen or heard from him in 5 years. Turns out he had a son in Phoenix. The son came up, got him with Spectrum Services. This man is clearly schizophrenic, and his name is Jeffrey. And it wasn't just Parkaman, but he was very much a loner. So he suffered from schizophrenia. He believed he owned 1,200 acres at the edge of town. That's where he was going. That's where he lived. His son came up. We were able to get him to a barber, cut his hair, which is very long. It weighed 8 pounds because it was full of all kinds of dirt, filth. He probably hadn't showered in years. Once I gave him a ride from the court to the mission, and my car smelled for a week. And we found him housing, and now he has services. And one thing that really helped in the political environment in our community was that with his permission, we did an article about him, and it went viral. And I can tell you the city council, the police, everybody in the community just loves the alternative sentencing program, and it was a huge success. And to see what I termed the resurrection of this man was nothing short of remarkable. Now I want to contrast that, and I'm going to shout out to my own hometown. There's another town where I take public defender appointments. And this is a town with stunning red rocks, and it's a very wealthy town. It has a state-of-the-art animal shelter, but there's no human shelter whatsoever. The criminal justice model there is the traditional one: fines, jail. And I've, obviously you know what town I'm talking about. It's my hometown, Sedona. And there's some great police officers there, and I'm sure they're quite frustrated. But what we have is a mill of jail, release, jail, release. And these are people who are mentally ill. I'm representing 2 individuals right now there that are charged with trespassing type of crimes, very low level, who were declared incompetent not only 6-8 months ago, and now they're being charged again. What happens, incompetency is a worthless tool in the city court level, because for a defense attorney, the only tool we have in that traditional model is to get someone declared incompetent, and then the charges are typically dropped because the cities can't afford to pay for restoration. So basically, we file the incompetency motion. I know they're going to be declared incompetent. They're released. Again, nothing changes. So what I'm trying to do now is, I feel like a proselytizer. I'm like peppering the court with these different models that we are all a part of here. And we have a release hearing on this Tuesday. Would love to have you all there. What I'm doing is sort of packing the courtroom, bringing in the Verde Valley mental health people, a city council member, people like that, and sort of bringing it to the forefront. And our judge now is listening, and he's saying, well, I didn't know I had these tools. So there can be well-meaning people that, especially in rural areas, that don't know what is there, and that there's a different way of doing this. So I'm just, again, it's the Nike approach, just do it. I'm taking the chutzpah and just going for it. So we'll see what happens. So thank you.
Honestly, Mick, I'm surprised with the power of the vortexes that there are any problems in Sedona. It's gonna take me a while to process that. My entire image of Sedona is shot. That was a public service announcement too. So, right, a Bisbee tourism announcement, exactly. Thank you. So, in the terms of attorney work in the state of Arizona, I think that our final panelist perspective is the other end of a spectrum. Mike works in the largest county attorney's office in the state, in the Maricopa County, the largest metro area in our state, the highest case volume. From the outside, I think folks look at a Maricopa County and say, my word, there's just resources everywhere. And Mike finds himself in his work managing a number of special programs and working to build networks and really focusing in the area of recidivism reduction in what is frankly an extraordinarily large system of courts in Maricopa County. So Mike, if you would just share some of your observations of our systems, things that are happening in Maricopa County that are positive, and maybe some of the things that still need some improvement.
Sure, thank you very much. I am the Special Assistant to the Chief Deputy at the Maricopa County Attorney's Office, and on behalf of Maricopa County, Bill Montgomery, I'd like to welcome everyone from outside the great state of Maricopa to our great state today, as it's affectionately referred to. As mentioned, I mean, we have about 4 million people right now in Maricopa County. That's a lot of people. It actually makes us about the 3rd or 4th largest jurisdiction in the entire nation. So to just kind of give you an idea of the amount of volume that we get, we get submitted about 35,000 felony cases a year at the Maricopa County Attorney's Office. We file roughly half those. So that's a lot to review. We have roughly 300 attorneys in our office, most of whom are prosecutors. So it's a big, big volume. And when you look at the DOC population demographically, 60% of the people, I think it's actually 62%, they can probably correct me if I'm wrong, or the exact number here. And then most of them are released back into Maricopa County, because most of them actually come from Maricopa County. So it's a big challenge, and there are a lot of resources here, but there's also a lot of people. And I just want to kind of go into, I have a unique opportunity in that County Attorney Montgomery assigned me initially to Smart Justice, which is the county initiative that was started about 7 years ago, maybe 6. I'm sure Dawn can correct me back there, the exact timing. But, and that was looking at reentry for the jail population. And then County Attorney Montgomery is one of the chairs of the governor's Arizona Substance Abuse Partnership. And there's a recidivism reduction working group that he asked me to chair as a subgroup of that. And that focuses on overseeing the Department of Justice grant funding that we got. And that's a statewide, and that primarily looks at the prison population. So one of the unique aspects of what I'm doing is that I get to see what's going on at the county jail levels with respect to reentry, and also around the state with respect to reentry. And I have to say that when I went to law school and I decided I wanted to prosecute, and I went to the Attorney General's office and this is not something I thought I was going to be doing, but it's very interesting work. And the first time I was really actually exposed to it, I'll share with you a story that I haven't really told before, is I had the great honor to work in Senator McCain's office in Washington in the spring of 2008 while I was a law student as a legal fellow. And you may not know this, but like people who write books send copies to senators. Like literally a room in his office was full of books that people had sent just wanting him to read it. And there were too many for any single human being to read. So the staff often would take one, and I picked one up, and it was called, I think, The Mentor and the CEO. It was written by Tom Pace. Has anyone read this book? Anyway, it's kind of based on real events, but it's fictional, and this CEO in Oklahoma goes to a church, and the church is dealing with former inmates, and he mentors this kid, Tony, who had been in trouble with the law, and says, you got to get on with your life. You got to start a business. You got to do that. And I think if I recall correctly, Tony's first business, he just got a shovel because he couldn't afford anything else. And he was digging holes for people. And then he grows from there and everything. And my understanding is it's kind of like based on actual events with that CEO. And this guy who wrote the book, he's the CEO of a corporation called Pace Butler, which is based in Oklahoma. Quick read, easy thing. But I said, that's really interesting. And so I look at that and the things that we're doing now, I kind of call them low-hanging fruit. Because when you think about it, that's what a lot of the stuff that has to happen is, right? We're really good as a system with taking a case and looking at it individually as to whether that person's guilty or innocent, right? And then even getting a sentence. But beyond that, there are basic things that just weren't happening. So the person does their time, they get released, whether it's from jail or somewhere else, and they don't have any support system, they don't have anything else going for them. Just basic things that people really systemically had been overlooked for many, 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 many years. And so a lot of the initiatives, whether it's smart justice or whether it's setting up, and by the way, Yavapai has a fantastic reentry coalition up there in existence, but they've been doing this. It's like, okay, well, let's look at getting this person, if they're eligible for access, get them enrolled. They don't have a driver's license, they don't have identification card. Well, that's something that could end up getting them in trouble. Let's get them one. Let's think about what employment opportunities does this person have? Not everyone's going to go get a shovel, start digging holes, grow their own business, become a CEO of a multi-million, but many of them can become productive citizens, and these are the barriers that have to be overcome, and a lot of it is just the discussion. I don't want to go on too long, but it's significant that even within our office, there's more prosecutors that now understand evidence-based. I won't say all of them do. I don't know that we've trained everyone, but we've had trainings on, well, what's an evidence-based program? What's a risk assessment, right? And then one thing in our office, which we do a lot of and is huge, one of the major cases, well, I would say the single major type of case, we get about 5,000 a year of just possession cases of illegal drugs. And most of those cases go into diversion by statute, right? And so we've looked at the diversion programs, and those have been going on for a long, long time, but are there ways that we can design those to get different and better outcomes? Should everyone be subjected to the same treatment? Some people going into diversion are lower risk defendants, whereas others aren't. So there's a number of things, and that's within Maricopa itself. On the state level, we're trying to replicate and use the funding to grow other coalitions in other counties that are successful, like Yavapai and Maricopa have, to help people get the basic things and to get a second chance and to become productive citizens, and so that they don't return to prison.
Thank you. I'll share that throughout my life I always wondered why presidents open libraries when they leave office, and now I have much deeper insight into that situation. Mike, one of the observations, I think it's really, really important when you touch on the prosecutors in the state of Arizona, and rightly so, prosecutors have tremendous discretion in the criminal justice system. What cases are prosecuted, how they're prosecuted, what's pled, what ends up in the hands of a jury. And it struck me when we opened, and Paul mentioned the integration of motivational interviewing and corrections officers learning those skills, and what a significant change that is in that environment. And then we think about Corey talking about police officers learning to be crisis interventionists learning all of the skills with mental health first aid, that it's probably not too much of an ask that all of our criminal prosecutors in the state really spend some time learning about risk assessment, true case evaluation, that one-size-fits-all treatment doesn't work, and sometimes terms in a plea agreement can set people up on just a path toward revocation. So I really kind of appreciate that, and it really marks, I think, a big challenge moving forward in how we take this to the next level in the state. And with that, I just want to ask the panelists, from their perspective, what are some of these issues that are there? What's next for us, and how do we push services and mental health intervention and the decriminalization of mental health in our state? Where do we go? What do we do as we move forward?
Well, I'll jump in on that if nobody else wants to jump the line. So a couple months ago, County Attorney Barbara Lawal changed my job title from DTAP Program Director to Director of Specialty Courts. And she did so with a very specific intention that we start to move away from these silos. The great thing about the Sequential Intercept map is it really maps out the system and where we need to be targeting people. But even by its design, it's these columns right here, and you do these things when they're here, and you do these things over there. But I really think that the next phase of our evolution is going to be breaking down those silos in between. Because when we are deflecting people in intercepts 0 and 1, these are people who are very experienced, usually in the justice system. Most of the folks that we've been working on are trying to target in Tucson and Pima County have 10 or 20 or more arrests over the last couple of years. But these are people who, when they're in Intercept 3, they're also often in Intercept 1. They're on probation and they're also getting arrested, or they're on a diversion program, but then we're also looking at what type of reentry can we do with them since they've probably gotten out of jail or prison within the last year. And those intercepts have not done a great job with talking to each other. When we're in the courts, we're really focused on what are we doing right now at this moment for their diversion program, or what are we doing for their probation program. But we're not planning for the mental health crisis where they're going to have another law enforcement contact. The more that we can educate ourselves on what the other intercepts are doing, but also find ways to collaborate across all those intercepts simultaneously. I will give credit to Chief Byron Gwaltney because we call the intercept the map. He calls it the intercept triangle because really it's those folks who are bouncing back and forth between these different systems. And so I think one of the things that we're really trying to focus on in the court system in Tucson and Pima County is having this umbrella and thinking of it more of a global perspective and a global interaction rather than this linear one. What we're hoping to do is create an umbrella of specialty courts. And specifically in the misdemeanor court system, we're looking to create a consolidated misdemeanor problem-solving court. We're calling it Compass Court for short. And we're breaking down those silos of, well, this person has mental health, and so they need to come over here. And this person has substance use issues, so we're going to put them in drug court. If you have a mental health court, you have a drug court. If you have a drug court, you have a mental health court. It's different acuity levels, different unique needs about what those treatment interventions should look like, but the reality is we're not talking about the underlying issue, we're talking about overall acuity. And that's why assessments are so important, so you understand the person's overall functionality. This person over here might really need employment services, and if we can just get them employed, we can redirect their entire trajectory. This person over here may not ever be capable of employment. And it will be a huge success if we can get them into housing and then just make them stay there. And so we're really trying to focus on not just what these underlying mental health needs are, but also can we create unique approaches that are going to be reflective of that individual's overall functionality and unique needs, but then also include all these other intercepts. So law enforcement needs to come to court. We need to be communicating in the courts with probation and what's happening with this person's probation team. if you guys within your communities take a look at the highest number of arrests in your jails, run the stats. Every jail has a data person. Go find that person. Make friends with them, and ask them to identify the people who've been arrested most often. I'm guessing yours will look like ours, where, yeah, we have, like most folks are engaged in treatment services. We're not seeing these, terrible violent offenders. We're seeing people typically with chronic alcohol use and some alcohol-related dementia, homelessness like everybody else. And when we started to do a breakdown on what those individual stories are and what they're looking at, it started to reveal those cracks. And we were really proud of ourselves. We're like, Pima County has got some great programs, and we do. And it's only when we look at the people who are in the most need and who are in the most acute states do we really understand where we're failing in these little tiny cracks in between. And we plug them with cross-system collaboration and understanding what's happening on the law enforcement level, at the courts level, and vice versa.
That's great.
One of the initiatives that I'm really excited about is being spearheaded by Access. Access is coming to the table. They've initiated a program called TIP, Targeted Investment Program. Any of you familiar with it? TIP? Well, what the TIP does is provide, everyone who comes out of prison and everyone who's under community supervision is enrolled in Access, because probably 90% of the people on our supervision they're eligible. But what TIP provides is, for us in community corrections, they will be actually embedded in our parole offices, one in Maricopa County and one in Tucson. And what they will be doing is that once they come out of prison, they'll be automatically enrolled in Access. We will then bring them to the TIP screener, who will then, and Shelly Curran just walked in the room, and she can probably hopefully talk more about it later. Hi, Shelly. But what they will do is that they will enroll these individuals in a local REBA and provide services to them, both mental health and health services, at the local community clinic. And Access will pay for it. Now, by Access paying for it, it takes away that barrier of having money to see a local doctor or a mental health clinic. They'll be providing case management services for them and routine follow-ups, not only for them, the individual, but also their families. And once you get people involved in health and mental health, that is good mental health and health services, hopefully people will benefit from that and eventually get out of the system because they're getting the help that they need. So this particular project for us starts next month. And we're really excited about having these professionals actually embedded in parole offices. Tucson Probation has actually a clinic, a whole clinic, embedded in their parole office there. Now there's, think about that, a whole mental health clinic embedded in a parole office. So they come see their parole officer, we immediately walk them over, or the probation officer, they immediately walk them over to see their case manager for the health services. Pretty impressive, and the state should be proud of that.
I think of two terms kind of summarize some of what they said, and it's soft handoff and continuity of care. And every time I hear those terms, I think of Don Noggle, because that's where I learned them. So, that's a key to really this whole thing, is making sure when someone's released from a system, whether it's jail or prison, that they have continued substance abuse treatment, which, by the way, I think it's 78% of the prison population has substance abuse issues, according to the department's monthly metrics. So that's one of the biggest needs that we see. The other thing I would just I have to bring up, because we just saw, Director Ryan just played these videos that the Department of Corrections just produced, and they're available on YouTube if you go to the Arizona Department of Corrections channel. And it actually shows you the centers that he just described and some of the efforts that are going on there as far as second chances. And there's also a Dress for Success video that talks about how a nonprofit in Phoenix is helping female inmates, get dressed, get ready for employment after release. So these are fantastic few minutes of your time, readily available on YouTube.
And I'll put an endorsement in as well for those videos. And honestly, when I watched those videos, I reflected on a proposed building project we have in Cochise County and thoughts of renovating our probation services center at our court complex in Sierra Vista, and really what all the opportunities are when you integrate services in one facility, because ultimately we're dealing with populations of people with limited transportation capacity, which is compounded in rural Arizona, limited financial capacities. When they are released, there's oftentimes difficulty connecting with mental health providers. And I just really appreciated that kind of shift for the Department of Corrections and what I think is pretty bold leadership in setting forth an opportunity to turn parole supervision centers into resource centers. And it just is a really important and exciting step forward in our state. And I think it's something that we can really take to much higher levels as we continue to integrate services. We have just a handful of minutes left. I will open the floor to any comment from our panelists. One of the, and just as a final thought, if someone wants to make comment, several of you, when we talk about program development, one of the things that's often a hang-up is money. And very often, and I know some of the best programs that we've initiated in state have roots in grant funding, but I'm just wondering how, from any experience of panelists, jurisdictions have overcome any absence of funding in starting some programs and initiatives to make things happen even when you don't get the grant.
Actually, that was one of the points I was going to make. Oftentimes, I've had long conversations with Bea about this, about how money is used, where it's used, and how it's best to be used on it. And one of Bea's points was always that a lot of times we do have the systems. We do have places for people. And it's about problem solving at the time and collaboration at the moment. And sometimes, and I think this might be helpful for some of our justice side of things to kind of poke at them a little bit, often our law enforcement responders, our first responders are in a hurry to handle this crisis so they can move to the next crisis, rather than just doing a very thorough job at the crisis that they're at that moment in time and doing that. And the Marine Corps had a saying when it had to do shooting, and it was slow as smooth and smooth as fast. And so a lot of times, by doing it correctly, taking a little more time on the front end, finding the best solution, we save a lot of time down the road. And for our health professionals, I'd like to push back a little bit on them too, that everybody has somebody they're representing and we all want to do the best. And it's very difficult to share information because some of our rules and regulations and stipulations say on information sharing, you say you can't share this information in this way, shape, or form. But it's to assist in finding creative solutions to be able to guide those people who are working with that individual to the best solution. Some part of your role is to guide justice, because I don't think that we can have very good public health without justice due to trauma in our communities. So we're going to have to find ways to work together, to collaborate better, to do community education campaigns, to make healthier families, to prevent trauma and prevent people from entering into the justice system through violence and trauma.
Well, I'll from the court's perspective, I've had the privilege of participating in a number of court creations. And every court that I've ever helped to build, we've always done it with existing resources. DTAP is the first program that I've had that has had a grant and has resources to be able to do great things like out-of-the-box stuff like tattoo removal and help with wraparound recovery resources. But it's so much easier to start without money and then add money later because there are resources there and they come in the form of human capital. I liked Chief Rhodes yesterday talking about his wife, April, saying, find the yes. If you can find the people who are willing to commit things that are already being done, and we don't need to create something new. Sometimes we just need to be smarter about the stuff that we're already doing. If we can find some way that this system is not being the most efficient and redirect that staff person who's already spending their time doing this, maybe we can be more clever and more innovative and redirect them to do that instead. Having existing resources contributed to court. And I don't mean money, I mean people. People is what makes these changes happen. Somebody who is physically there, present, who has knowledge about the person or the resources available back at their agencies, that is what makes change happen. And then write a grant after you got things up and running to do very clever out-of-the-box stuff, help with housing. But you know what? A lot of times you don't need to ask for more money to do stuff because if you are really educated about what the resources are in your community, you can probably find a lot of what you need existing that's already being underutilized or not utilized correctly. So be out of the box and creative before you look for money.
I would ditto that. From the court perspective or involving in the court, we are using in Cottonwood just existing resources. There is no other resource. It's just us. And I think what has to happen is you need to recruit true believers in the process. And the people that are really indispensable are not necessarily the judge, the prosecutor, but public defenders. You know, they are your best friend if you're a prosecutor because they're going to be out working, getting those services on behalf of the defendant. I was wondering how many public defenders are here today? Can I see some hands? Great. Okay, so a shout out to all of you folks. I think sometimes your role in this is not recognized as much as it should be. And it takes all the parts here, so. Thanks.
I'm going to close this out with just one final observation on, and it's a dovetail to something Mick mentioned earlier when he was talking, that we are living in really the greatest information age, where through social media, we can share stories instantaneously. And sometimes when you're trying to build local momentum around programs of support, programs that are different from the traditional ways of thinking, newspaper stories, social media posts, and just sharing of information about stories and outcomes that are positive can really help change a local dialogue about how we solve our problems. So I encourage you all to be prolific Googlers as you work to solve local problems. And with that, I will encourage you, if you ever get the chance and want some entertainment on a Sunday evening, just Google, what is it? I've got to check my notes. Well, no, there's that, but there you can have a whole lot more fun when you Google Michael Mitchell, and you're going to get 20,000 or so articles, and you'll narrow it down to Arizona, and you're going to nail it down to attorney, and you're still going to have articles that when you think about that person being on your panel, it sends shockwaves through you. But ultimately, you'll find wonderful information about Michael as a professional and about the other professionals that are here. So thank you for your time today. I hope you enjoy the rest of the conference.
Dr. Dawn Noggle has served in many roles throughout her career, including as a clinical psychologist, administrator, consultant, researcher, and professor. She is the Mental Health Director and Justice Community Partnership Strategist for Maricopa County Correctional Health Services, co-chair of the Smart Justice Committee, and a key leader in Maricopa County's Stepping Up, a national initiative to reduce incarceration of people with mental illness and addictions. And Shelly is a licensed professional counselor and the director of crisis, cultural, prevention, and court programs for Mercy Care, which is the regional behavioral health authority for Central Arizona. She has worked for over 20 years with justice-involved persons in the public mental health system. Part of her role at Mercy Care is to oversee the court services and jail diversion teams, which include mental health professionals who work as a bridge between clients, families, and the criminal justice system. I'm so honored to introduce Dawn Noggle and Shelly Curran.
Thank you, Ray. That was very nice. Thank you all for giving us some time today to just share what work we've been doing in Maricopa County up to this point through the Stepping Up initiative. We just thought it was important to celebrate our partners, celebrate the success that we've had, and then identify the areas where we can continue to move forward, continue to make strides in this area of mental health and criminal justice and where the two intersect. So you've all heard about the Sequential Intercept model, the SIM. I saw the Gain Center handouts at the various tables. This is our map here for Maricopa County. And I don't know, Don, have we gone over this yet in the conference or just the general? Okay, so this is Maricopa County, the 4 intercepts where mental health and criminal justice intersect. These are all of our different providers and different services that we have here that have been developed over the years to meet the needs of people with mental health and substance abuse issues that are involved in the justice system. So I'm not going to go over each of these individual ones, but I do want to let you know that Dr. Noggle and I have both formatted our presentations today based on the intercepts. So I'm glad you've had a little bit of an overview of that, and we're going to talk about what we're doing here in Maricopa through the intercept lens. So intercept 1 is law enforcement and emergency services. We are fortunate in Maricopa County to have a unified crisis system. The unified crisis system came about as a result of actually the Arnold Sarin class action lawsuit that demanded that the state and the county and the Regional Behavioral Health Authority work together in order to meet the needs of people with mental illness in our community. One of the things that we're very proud of here in Maricopa County, and I see a lot of our CIT partners here in the room today, is the crisis intervention team programs. Crisis intervention team training has been occurring for a good 10 years here in our county. For a while, it was just City of Phoenix and City of Tempe doing their best to train as many folks as they could. And the East Valley and the West Valley realized that there just was not enough bandwidth in the trainings that were occurring to meet the needs of our community. So East Valley CIT came up, and then West Valley as well. These are all the different agencies that have been represented in our CIT training just in the year of 2017. Mercy Care partners with each of the 3 CIT programs to make sure that we're supporting them, bringing mental health professionals to the table, helping to provide some resources, just really partnering with the law enforcement to make sure that we're able to help them put on a good CIT program in each of the 3 areas. So as you see, there's been 310 officers trained by the 3 schools in 2017 from all these different jurisdictions. So it truly is a community partnership working to make sure that law enforcement officers not only can recognize when they're dealing with someone who might have mental health issues, but one of the most important parts of CIT is, so when you identify somebody, where do you go? How can you help them besides just taking them to jail? Which brings us to our crisis system. So this is where we've been at so far in 2018. Crisis Mobile Teams is a team of mental health professionals and a peer who actually go out into the community to help somebody who's in a mental health emergency. And as you can see here, our response time to law enforcement is we have a higher expectation of the mobile teams when they're responding to law enforcement. Our expectation is that they are on scene within 30 minutes of being dispatched. On an average, some are like 10, some are 40, but we really want them to get out quickly to law enforcement. If you have an officer that's on scene with someone and has identified that they need help, we want to get a mobile team out there quickly. And then we have average response time for someone when there's not an officer on scene. This is how many mobile teams were dispatched to law enforcement back all the way to 2015. So as you see, it's pretty steady. We've got to climb when you look at it year over year. So 275, 300 times a month, mobile teams are dispatched out to meet with law enforcement on the scene. And how do the officers know how to call for a mobile team? They've gone through crisis intervention training, and so they know. These are police drop-offs to our crisis system and to our detox services. And we have a no wrong door philosophy. If somebody really needed to have behavioral health services and an officer took them to a detox, it was no longer, oh, I'm sorry, you took them to the wrong place, you need to take them down the street or you need to take them across town. No, if the officer brings somebody to one of our reception centers, they say, thank you very much, officer, have a good day, and they're on their way. And then the mental health professionals or the substance abuse professionals help that person get to where they need to be, let that officer get back out on the street. So as you can see, when you look at the line overall, our numbers are really going up in regards to police drop-offs to both mental health and substance abuse facilities. And we attribute quite a bit of that to the increased number of officers that we've been able to train now that all three programs are up and running. And I'm sorry I'm going fast, but we usually have a whole hour on each intercept, so I'm running through it. So when people actually get to the crisis facilities, these are the places that take folks in voluntarily. So if they're not agreeing to come, but the officer thinks they need mental health treatment, they can bring them into UPC, which is downtown Phoenix. They can take them to RRC, which is 99th and Peoria, or they can take them to CPEC, which is in Mesa. We work really hard, and the use of peers is key to helping folks that are in a crisis situation understand that there is help for them, that there are people that see hope for them, and we really work hard to convert people who are brought in handcuffs to have them leave without cuffs and go into the care that they need on a voluntary basis. So we incentivize our agencies to really push towards that voluntary conversion rate, and the use of peers is key in them being able to have that success. As you can see, our PD drop-off times in minutes, so it's a lot faster than booking someone to bring them to one of our three facilities. Right, so that was a crisis system and law enforcement. Now we're going to talk about Intercept 2, which is the initial detention and the initial court hearing. So this is what we call post-booking diversion. Someone's been arrested, brought into custody, and they're going to go see a judge. This is our misdemeanor jail diversion for the SMI folks, and this is just City of Phoenix. We do have courts. I see Judge Finn's out there. She does misdemeanor jail diversion out of her jail. We do it out of Mesa. There's really good coordination with the cities. Phoenix is the biggest city, and we actually have staff that are at each of their initial appearance courts. And this is the jail diversion that we were able to do on a month in and month out basis. One of the reasons why this jail diversion is so successful is that we do have a data link with the Maricopa County Sheriff's Office. Every 15 minutes, everybody that's booked into their jail is run through our enrollment system, and then the jail diversion team that's there at the 4th Avenue Jail, which is the central intake facility for Maricopa County, says, oh, look, we've got somebody here who is enrolled for SMI services or used to be enrolled but hasn't seen anyone in a couple years, and then they're able to intervene and work on that person's behalf. Also have a criminal justice engagement team, and this is run by Southwest Behavioral Health. And the criminal justice engagement team is there at initial appearance, and they are able to provide assistance immediately upon that person's release. One of the things that we found through Smart Justice, through analyzing the information of people that were eligible for SMI services and who were booked in the jail, is that we found that they were staying longer than other folks that were there for the same offense and had the same criminal background. And we started looking at their bonds, And they were like, $100, $200. And I'm like, where are these bonds coming from? And it really came from judges who had big hearts and initial appearance, and they were worried about the person. I don't want to just send him back out on the street. What's going to happen to him? Maybe if he stays in jail, he can get stable. And so we like, oh, that's not a good place for someone to try to get stable. Let's see what we can do to help ease your concern about having this person released. So the Southwest team is referred to either through the jail diversion team for Mercy Care, or through Dr. Noggle's staff at Correctional Health Services, or through Maricopa County Adult Probation Pretrial Services. So both felonies and misdemeanors. So if somebody is screened and it's determined that they would be okay to be released if they have some support, there's no criminal element that's concerning to probation, that they're not going to come back for court, right? Or that they're going to be somehow dangerous out there in the world. So we let the judge know, hey, this person is eligible for the criminal justice engagement team. And then 3 times a day, 365 days a year, the van pulls out in front of 4th Avenue Jail and accepts the people that are referred. And then the Southwest staff help them be connected to care, and they provide intensive case management for up to 3 months. Yeah, please, and go ahead, Don.
So, can you guys hear as we...
Come up here. No.
I'll make this really quick, but as Sheila Polk talked about and we've been talking about and Nastasia has encouraged, we really have to get baseline data to be able to see if we're having an impact. So before we even had this program completely set up where we have the Southwest behavioral staff inside the jail encouraging people, so it was really just the program getting offered and the van coming to pick them up, we were able to show that for people that accepted the program, who had similar characteristics matched to the people that didn't accept the program, we showed a 27% decrease in recidivism. So this is the kind of stuff that we have to do to really show impact, and I just wanted to put that out there.
Thank you. And one of the other things that we found looking at the information from Smart Justice was the #1 reason for someone that was enrolled for SMI services or that was eligible for SMI services to go into jail, you know what the #1 reason was? Failure to appear for their court hearing. So the criminal justice engagement team gets their release conditions and helps that person make sure that they understand their need to come back to court and helps them to get back to court. So that's one of the reasons, not the only, but one of the reasons why the recidivism rate had dropped so much for that group. Data. So Intercept 3, jails and courts. Access has a suspense agreement with most of the jails, most of the counties in Arizona. I think all but one now has a suspense agreement. The one jail in Arizona, or Maricopa County, that does not have the suspense agreement is with the city of Mesa, and that's because they just haven't been able to get it set up yet. I know they're trying, but we don't have a suspense agreement right now with the Mesa jail. They contract with a different jail. One of the good things about the suspense agreement is that when someone is Title 19, and as we were talking about earlier, with Medicaid expansion, with the complete care contracts going out, with the medical and the behavioral health services, with the benefits all being combined into one integrated system now, if someone goes to jail, historically, they used to be cut off from their access, cut off from their Medicaid benefit, and they'd have to reapply, it'd take them 3 months to get back on. So with the suspense agreement, they come in, they get suspended while they're in there. When they come out, 2 days later, usually 2 days later, it comes right back on. So there's no gap in care for those folks, no gap in their benefit. In Maricopa County and all other counties, this is part of the contract that all the complete care plans have with Access. The behavioral health providers must ensure that appropriate coordination occurs for behavioral health members with jail personnel at county jails. There is a section in HIPAA that allows us to share information, as long as it's not substance abuse information or HIV information, with the correctional health services staff in the jail. If they say there's a need for the information, we just send it right over. All of the agencies that are participating in complete care are doing justice transition notices with the Maricopa County Jail. And that's where we identify one of our members who's in jail, and we let the jail know what their conditions are, what they're being treated for in the community. And if Correctional Health Services identifies a condition that we didn't know about before the person went in, maybe we didn't know that that person had diabetes or high blood pressure or was pregnant, and the jail then lets us know back so we can coordinate care into the community. All of the plans have justice region requirements now. They are required to actually develop plans for people that are in jail to help them have a smooth transition to the community. Intercept 4. Wanted to spend some time on reach out. Maricopa County Adult Probation has had a program since the 90s where they identify people who need substance abuse treatment and bring them out of jail directly into residential substance abuse treatment. We found a couple years ago that the coordination of care with all of our community providers really wasn't as tight as it could be, and there were a lot of people that were eligible for this that weren't receiving it. They weren't even getting a referral. So Access and Mercy Care and Adult Probation and Correctional Health Services all came to the table to figure out how can we make a better connection. These are the partners that are with Reach Out. And look at the progress that we've been able to make just over the last couple fiscal years. We've been able to place into residential treatment 300 folks on one of the months, almost 300 folks. We're back, it used to be like 10, right? The folks that weren't placed, it was because maybe they had a warrant or something pop up, maybe they didn't want to work with a specific provider. There were some various reasons why they weren't placed, but just look at that increase. With the Medicaid expansion, Mercy Care has been able to contract with more and more residential treatment providers to help meet this need in our community, and also with the grant funding that we received through Access, through the substance abuse block grant funding, and through the state funding for opioid initiative. We are able to get people directly out of jail early into residential treatment. It works really well. Here's some of the data for fiscal year 2017. This is preliminary data. We did present this at the Summer Institute at ASU, so it's not like it's not published, but it still might change a little bit. But essentially, for fiscal year 2017, there were 524 folks released early from jail into residential treatment. Most of these folks are considered high risk or medium high risk by adult probation, at risk to recidivate back into the justice system. And they're high need because they've been determined through a screening that they actually need residential treatment. This is just not putting someone in residential because they need a place to live. This is actually people who qualify, meet medical necessity for treatment. 60% that actually stay past the first or second day successfully complete treatment. And when you're talking about a high-risk, high-need community, that is just a wonderful outcome. So we're getting probationers out of jail early into treatment. Most of them are successfully completing. Most of those who successfully complete end up successfully completing probation. And again, significant outcomes when you consider this is a high-risk, high-need population. We also do referrals directly from jail into the community, so when people are identified by probation as having substance use disorder or mental health issues, we're able to get them connected prior to leaving so that they know when their appointment is, their probation officer knows when their appointment is, and we've got transportation arranged so that there's really a good connect to care as they're leaving the jail. Okay, we have a Thinking for Change with Maricopa County Adult Probation for the general mental health population and the SMI population. And again, this is using REBA funds, using Title 19 access funds to pay for these services. So Adult Probation is in partnership with us. They have officers co-facilitate these groups, and we are able to fund it through Title 19 dollars. Mercy Care also has a contract with Adult Probation for their drug court counselors. Their drug court counselors do an incredible job. And if someone's Title 19 and eligible for a benefit, why shouldn't we pay for that? Right? Let's let probation use their money for folks that don't have the coverage. One last thing I wanted to talk about is our forensic assertive community treatment teams. We have 3 teams in Maricopa County. They serve 300 people. We've had some incredible results with those teams, and that truly is a partnership with adult probation, with Department of Corrections, with Correctional Health Services, with law enforcement. Referrals to the FACT teams are for people who are eligible for SMI services and have a high risk to recidivate into the criminal justice system. And through really bringing, the referrals come from our justice partners, and justice partners are part of the team. And as you can see, we've had just some incredible results. We actually won a national award for the most innovative practice with all the Medicaid plans across the country based on the results of our FACT teams. And we've been able to maintain in the following years that success. And that's what I had, so thank you so much. I'll hand it over to Dr. Noggle.
Whoop. Oh. Sensitive. Okay, so Nastasia, I don't see if you're here, but one of the things that we know with Stepping Up is that we really need to get data. We have to start with baseline data so we can see what we're doing. So this shows you, it shows you the size of what we're dealing with in Maricopa County, but it also shows you where we are in terms of overall bookings. So we have last year 98,110 people coming in. That's a lot of people to try to do release planning with. So what we really work on is also using evidence-based practices to really identify who is that high needs, high risk population. Now, Shelly mentioned briefly the health plans, and how many of you are aware of the reintegration of behavioral health, except for the seriously mentally ill, back to the health plans and the selection of the Arizona Complete Care plans? How many of you are aware of that? Okay, so pretty much everybody. Can we have all of the justice liaisons that are here, can we please have you all stand up? We have great representation from the justice liaisons here today. Now, why I have this slide up here, in a few minutes I'm going to show you the outcome data we have so far from having taken this smart justice and stepping up approach to the seriously mentally ill. We've showed really good outcomes because we've had concentrated, targeted interventions. When you think about this, this is revolutionary. We really have to thank Tom Betlock and our partners with Access, some of who are here. Who's here from Access? Please stand up. Kathy, of course. Okay. Because Access heard us when we said that justice-involved people need something different than the traditional seriously mentally ill designated person or traditional member of your health plan. Access heard us, and what they've done with these complete care plans is they created specific contract compliance requirements for all of the health plans regarding the justice involved. Now, if I were a health plan and I had additional requirements because somebody was over here complaining about a certain population, I might not be happy about that. But let me tell you, these justice liaison specialists, they are our people. They are all over this. They are looking at each of these requirements and saying, what can we do? And they're working together. Now, when you think about this, because of that requirement to reach in on chronic conditions, and because as a jail correctional health service, we can let these plans know about health conditions they may not have known. And that's what Mary always says from United Health. You guys know stuff we don't know because people have not been using their health insurance, right? Medicaid expansion is fairly new. So look at these numbers. What this means now is that we have an opportunity to target an even broader population. Oh, it's time. Okay, I'm going to have to quit. So I'll be able to send you out slides, but what this means is that we're going to be reaching a much greater number of people than we have. I want to tell you that I won't be able to show you the outcomes, but what I can show you is that through targeted interventions, we have been able to reduce recidivism by as much as 10 to 20% for the higher risk, seriously mentally ill. We'll send all of these things out to you. But this is what I want to tell you. While 5% of our bookings are seriously mentally ill, does that mean we're better because we know that a number of jails have a higher number? It doesn't. It means what all of you have been saying. Maricopa County, we're a denser county, and we've had the resources. We've had this integrated crisis service system, so we should be better. But the truth is, if you think about where we've all come from for the last 3 years, Mary Lou has made it very clear that this coalition, this group, was never going to just be about Maricopa County or Maricopa County and Pima County. It was going to be about us as a state, and as a state, how we're stepping forward. Think about the panels that you've heard, for those of you that have been here any of these other years. The work that is going on in this state is amazing. I hear somebody like Kate get up here and say, we're gonna plug in the holes across these intercepts. The work that Yavapai is doing, we really all need to get behind that, because if they succeed, and if they've got 9 release planners, I want to take Mary's team, we have 2 release planners for our population. If they succeed, they prove the concept. If we get it done at the level of the jail, then people don't end up, very few people end up in prison. We know that about our population. So again, the incredible work that you all are doing here, we keep moving forward together because we learn from each other. So we can send slides out and give you data later.